Recommending you all should have a copy of landlines at this point. I'm not going to spend the night going over all the things we've been doing for the last few months because there's a great issue of landlines that Amy just put out, and you can look at that for all the details. There are a couple points I want to touch on. One of them is within landlines, there's a great article by Sally Rieger on our Glover property, which is up off of Route 187 on the top of or halfway up the hill headed towards Bluefield. And a few months ago, back in October, Sally put together a bunch of volunteers and quite a few native plants and put together a great native plant garden on the Glover property. And I'd like to encourage everybody to take a walk there and use it. As we all know, when we put properties together for the land trust, one of the first things that we do is we get out there and clear off the invasives and try to help reestablish the native plants. And the main reason, in an oversimplified explanation, the main reason for that is that for millions of years of evolution, the native insects have evolved to eat the native plants, and they really can't eat the invasive plants. So when you reestablish the native plants, you can exponentially increase the amount of food that's out there for the smaller animals, the birds and reptiles and amphibians on the property. So what we're trying to do is get more food out there for the animals that we're trying to support. Even a land trust as good as the Simsbury Land Trust is doomed to never be able to do enough of that. That's just the way it is. But if you can work on creating a native plant garden in your own yard, you can help establish this whole base for the wildlife out there. And that's the main reason that garden is there, so that you can use it as an example of some really pretty plants that are going to grow there that you can put in your own garden. Sally's article also includes some references on things you can read. There's a book by Douglas Talamay that's really great about how to plant a garden in your own yard with native plants. So I would encourage you all to get out on the property, check that out as everything comes out to bloom this spring, and enjoy it. Last year at this time, we were finishing up on our work of preserving the George Hall Farm. This year I would like to announce that the Connecticut Land Conservation Council has awarded the town of Simsbury and the Simsbury Land Trust the 2001 Excellence in Conservation Award. This prestigious award is in recognition of the significance of the town and the land trust getting together to put a very complicated deal together which mutually benefits everyone, farm owners, town, and land trust. So I'd like to give everybody who was involved with that a big hand. Also, while I'm up here, before I forget, I'd like to announce that we have a hiking club now, and the first meeting is this weekend. If you would like to be involved with that, go on the website and you'll find out about that. Anytime you're talking about preserving property, the first thing that you're going to think of is Dick Davis. Dick has been instrumental in all of our major acquisitions, and as the acquisitions go on, they get tougher and tougher and more complicated. Dick is going to come up tonight and announce the most complicated one yet that he's successfully brought to close. We just recently, within days, have closed on the Tanager Hill property. Dick?
I guess by now everybody knows this is
louder.
How about that? Is that better?
Yeah.
I'd like to take a few moments and, Fred was kind speak about my role, but these projects involve a great many people, great many players, and I'd like to go down a list of some of those people and explain, acknowledge their role. There we go. Acknowledge their role and thank them. First, I'd like to mention Eric Lehman and the Connecticut Forest and Park Association, who very early on offered their help and introduced us to the National Park Service. Eric, in particular, worked extremely hard for quite a number of months to work an application through the National Park Service. The representatives of the Park Service from Washington came to Simsbury 3 times to look at the property, meet with ourselves and the DEP, and really get to know the property. They were convinced it was a good one. It was approved by the Department of the Interior. It was ranked number 2 out of 43 nationwide that they were considering. And unfortunately, in the end, it was not to be. But I did want to mention Eric and all the effort that he and others put into getting that application as far as it did get. I'd also like to there's a whole range of kind of experts in biology and the outdoors that have advised us and steered us as we've number one, confirmed what we basically knew, that this was a really spectacular property, but also pointed us in the direction of some specific reasons that we could use to convince others that it was spectacular. And I just mentioned Pat Cummins with Audubon, Connecticut, Eileen Fielding, Farmington River Watershed Association, Elaine Hochhalser with the Connecticut Forestry. I want to mention the DEP. They gave us, as they have on several of our previous projects, they gave us an early grant, and remarkably, over the next 2 years, as the property got reconfigured and the transaction changed, they stuck with us and kept the grant open. And we could not have done it without the state help. I'd also like to mention we had several major grants for private foundations that again were essential. The Hartford Foundation for Public Giving and the Richard P. Garmany Fund, Maggie Willard and David Polk, who directed this project through the organization. They took the time to come out and spend time on the property, spend time with us, and really get to know how important it was. And they were able to get a sizable grant from the Richard P. Garmany Fund. In addition, the the Community Fund of Northwest Connecticut, Susan Bremer, brought our attention to the John T. and Jane A. Whiterhold Foundation, and again, they made a very significant contribution. I asked Susan, as we were working on the application, how she came to call on the Simsbury Land Trust. They're an organization in the northwest part of the state, and there are, as we all know, there are over 100 land trusts here in Connecticut to choose from. She said that she had been looking at land trusts on the internet, and that our website caught her attention, and I guess we had an article at that time on the website, and she said this is just what we were looking for, and encouraged us to make an application. And finally, thanks to Roger Preston, we got a nice grant from the Hartford Audubon Society. In addition, we've had been very fortunate for basically the last 15 years when we've made most of our acquisitions to have a very strong and very consistent and loyal core of large donors that have helped us time and again, and it came through again this time. Steve and Beth Valentine, I guess, have left. Tim and Cheryl Rourke, David and Barbara Chase, and when I was out on the property with David Chase, we were talking, and he commented at one point, "Gee, this is the kind of property that my sister would really appreciate." His sister lives outside of Boston, in Massachusetts, and I'm not sure how often she gets to Simsbury, but as it turned out, she also gave a very significant contribution to the effort. A number of people that live neighbors to the property that live adjacent or very close to the property were very supportive. Just to mention a few, Kevin Gall and Paula Jones with the Winterbury Land Trust, they live in Bloomfield, and they're working on a similar property, Hawk Hill Farm. Is directly across the ridge from the Ellsworth property. So they're very much aware of what we're doing as we are with what they're doing. And they gave a very nice contribution. John and Jackie McCormick, Faith Wyman and Jim Miller, Laird Mortimer, and many others. And I want to thank all of the people that took part in the campaign committee, particularly early on when it was the toughest, and all the people that had events in their homes and in their backyards and so forth. And finally, I want to thank the membership and all the friends in the community of the Simsbury Land Trust. The large donors are essential, but equally essential is the number of people that help out. We need to show not just that there's money there, but that there's broad-based public support for what we're doing, and everyone's participation is essential from that standpoint. I'd finally like to, I think oftentimes when we thank people, the one group that we tend to not overlook but can't thank enough is the owner who chooses to sell their property to the land trust. There are numerous alternatives to selling to a land trust, and many of them are more lucrative. Many of them are a lot easier to get done, and certainly in our experience, the people that we've dealt with in Simsbury are very sincerely want to see their property preserved, and that's certainly the case with Tanager Hill. And I want to thank Tim Ellsworth in particular and his three sisters, Star Sayers and Troy Broughton and Eleanor Ellsworth. I had to go back on numerous occasions and ask for an extension of the deadline, which was the absolute deadline every time, but Tim never said no. And we had more than the usual twists and turns with this project, and we had to make some major changes to the structure of the transaction on a couple of occasions, and Tim was not only open-minded but extremely helpful in keeping us focused and coming up with some workable ideas. So I want to thank Tim and Janet here tonight. The sisters couldn't be here tonight. We're going to have a more formal celebration, or bigger celebration, formal ceremony recognizing this transaction probably in June, and hope you can all come. And thank you all for all the support that you've given us for many years now. Thank you.
Thank you, Dick. Before I announce tonight's speaker, I'd just like to give you all a personal thank you. Believe it or not, I am the currently longest tenured member of the Land Trust. During my time on the board, during my time on the board, we've done a lot of things that I've been proud of the group for doing. And I would have to say this last year, and partly because I've been the president, but this last year in the finishing up of the purchase of Tanager Hill has been probably the most gratifying thing that I've personally witnessed, because in the end, we lost some of the money we expected, and it was a really tough thing for us, those of us who had to talk about how we were going to come up with the last bit of money, and it was quite a bit of money, how we were going to do it, because we'd already asked everybody for it. We just finished Hall, we had no more grants in sight, and we said we're just going to go back to the membership and the people of Simsbury. And everyone came through. And this is the group right here that did it. I mean, I can look at every name tag and I can say, this is basically the group that came through in the end. Some people came back a second time and gave us more money. And I really believe that what you're going to see with this property, you're going to be very, very happy you did in the end. So thank you again very, very much. I would like to next announce our speaker for the evening, Eric Lehman. Eric is the director of composition program and teaches creative writing at the University of Bridgeport. Over the years, he has published numerous acclaimed books, essays, articles, and poems. One of Eric's most recent books, which I read recently, is called Afoot in Connecticut. It's a really nicely written book, enjoyable to read. Very, very descriptive. There was a part in the book where he was describing the blisters that he got in his long hike across Connecticut. By the time I was done reading them, my feet hurt. I really enjoyed Eric's writing because he appreciates the great joy that you can take in walking in an area that's not the Grand Canyon, it's not Yellowstone, it's Connecticut. But there's so many great little places you can get out and walk and look at the history, meet interesting characters, and just enjoy what's in front of you right out there on the trail. And Eric brings that joy in his books, and I'm sure he's going to bring it to you as he gives us a nice talk tonight. Thank you very much, everybody, and here's Eric.
I'm going to pull this off here so I can walk around. I can't stay still. I've been still enough tonight. And I had to take off my jacket because I thought, how am I going to talk about walking and hiking in the woods in Connecticut and have a jacket on? It just didn't make any sense. So I'm very pleased to be here tonight to talk to you about my book, Afoot in Connecticut, and about my adventures, and then talk a little about what you can do as a land trust and as individuals to try to improve the life for walkers in Connecticut, but really for everybody. Let me just read a little bit here. I guess I am going to have to stand behind this a little bit. I'll just read the opening here. On a quiet summer day, I parked under the white pines at Sleeping Giant State Park and shouldered a heavy pack full of love letters. Heading down the rocky path, I paused at the Mill River, watched a fisherman cast for trout, then headed up the trail to the old quarry. A happy couple frolicked below on the grassy meadow, and I looked away, gripping my walking stick up the steep, barren ridge, tree, up and up into the sky. Breathing heavily, crushed under the weight of the load, I struggled my way up the edge of the quarry and beyond it to the flat forehead of the giant, where I rested on a large boulder. Instead of continuing on the trail to the cliffs that formed the monster's chin, I turned left into the sparse forest and yellow grasses, heading down again past the falcon nests, carefully placing feet on the steep, pathless slope. Finally, in a small vertical meadow, I set the pack down and tested the earth with my walking stick. Finding an appropriate spot, I took out my small Primus stove and boiled water, letting the wind blow my hair from my face. When the brew had finished, I sipped the steaming tea, idly sifting through the box of love letters, reading a line here and there. Then, putting the empty mug away, I pulled a shovel from the heavy pack and began to dig. So, I came to Connecticut with a girl, my college girlfriend, and then we broke up. And of course, I didn't know anybody in Connecticut, and I was sort of stuck here. I got jobs at the University of Bridgeport and a couple other universities to start out with before I got my full-time job, and I was all by myself. So what did I do? Well, I was a hiker already, to some extent, although I really feel like I became a walker and a hiker here in Connecticut, because I pretty much hiked 2 or 3 days every week for about a decade, and maybe more. And and then after I met my wife, I hiked even more. I fell in love with Connecticut this way. I've written 10 books about the state now, about the food of Connecticut, the wine of Connecticut, the literature of Connecticut. I have one coming out in the town greens of Connecticut this fall, and other ones. And I really have to say, the reason I loved Connecticut, the reason I came to appreciate it as my home, as a place that I wanted to spend my whole life in, was because of the nature of Connecticut, the trails, the history. That's a great little old road there. So this is what I was doing. I got the maps of the blue trails first, and I hiked every blue trail, and I hiked the Appalachian Trail, and then I hiked all the green lanes, and I was like, I'm done. And then I realized there were land trust trails, and there were some towns had their own trails. I'm like, oh my God, I'm never going to finish this, and I haven't finished it. It's impossible. I don't think one person could hike every trail in Connecticut. I think that's the work of a lifetime at least, and more because we're always making new trails. I was just hearing that you guys were making a new trail connecting, and we'll talk about that later. So I think that not enough people appreciate that. Not enough people appreciate what a wonderful state we have for hiking in nature. Many people that I run into, and my wife and I run into when we're presenting all over the state and talking about Connecticut food or something, they appreciate the food. They appreciate the museums that we have. They appreciate the theaters we have here in Connecticut, things like that. But I rarely run into people, except at a place like this, who appreciate the nature of Connecticut, the outdoors, the land of Connecticut, the trails. And that's why I'm very excited to be here tonight, because I know you guys are just like me, and that you love Connecticut, or at least Simsbury, because of its wonderful open spaces and wilderness spaces. So I'm going to read a little adventure of mine from here, and then we're going to talk about Simsbury itself. Let's find this here. You can look at all my pictures. Of course, for the first, 7 years I was hiking in Connecticut, I did not have a digital camera. So I have these are only pictures from the last, 10 years. But I really have a whole stack of old photos that maybe I should scan in at some point. Let's see. Okay, so this is a chapter on one of my hikes across Connecticut. I've done a couple different hikes and bike rides across the state. This is one that I took with a friend of mine who I just convinced to move to Connecticut. He's from Pennsylvania, but now he's like, he had moved to New Zealand for a couple years and now he's back. He's like, I don't like Pennsylvania anymore. I was like, come here, come to Connecticut. So he knows Connecticut and more than some people who live here because he walked the state from Old Lyme up to, I don't know, where was that on the border? Wherever Route 197 hits the border in Massachusetts. So, this is a little adventure that we had. This is on one of the days of the hike across Connecticut. I stretched out of the tent, reaching for the tall, thick trees that surrounded the Pine Needle campsite. Morning chores went smoothly until we cooked an unappetizing breakfast of cheesy vegetable soup. No, I forgot to tell you, this is the worst day I've ever spent hiking in Connecticut. Okay. I've had worse days than this, but they were like in the Andes in Peru. That was a little more difficult, but okay. So I realized that last night we had made a minor error that would come back to haunt us later. A delightful fire had sprung up in the reflector pit, and we had read out loud, recovering from our second day's trials. But all the while, the Primus fuel bubbled away, heating the pasta and meat sauce far too long. This was the beginning of a series of problems that would take Ryan and I through katabasis, a Greek term we had learned from our reading of Robert Bly. It means a descending or a drop through the floor. This walk started off agreeably enough, despite this nagging doubt. Back on Leonard's Bridge Road, this is south of Willimantic, morning workers exited their villas, glancing curiously at us. We turned right on the red-brown tobacco road, past misty farms and half-hidden hermitages. Ryan's feet quickly began hampering him, thick with blisters, like mine on the first attempt, which you were talking about. And I was nice. I didn't put those pictures. I have pictures of those blisters. They are not in here, so because I thought that would put you off your dessert. My quadriceps began to go numb. At the end of Tobacco Road, we turned left and then right onto Airline State Park Trail, which we were to follow the bulk of the day. The trail was an old railroad bed that sometimes rose up on a causeway above the surrounding forest and sometimes dropped below like a trough. A jogger with a dog waved at us going west and caught us returning east while her dog barked nervously at these three-legged creatures. "You can't figure out your walking sticks," she laughed. She also warned us about a detour around a farm up ahead. Sure enough, a few miles later, a fence blocked our way, and we orienteered around the tract and the rural roads. They were charming and broad with soft edges for walking, but this detour added yet another mile. Near the ancient Scoville Cemetery, founded in 1733, a resident stopped his car and pointed the way. "We're having trouble with the farmer," he told us. Gray cloud. I still haven't acquired the New England accent since I've been up here, although I do drop my T's in the middle, like all of you do. I know you do. Right? Clinton, Connecticut, New Britain. No? Okay. I do that now too. Okay, so at some point we passed Ryan's record for total hiking distance, achieved with me in the White Mountains a few years earlier. The town of Willimantic appeared at approximately 8 miles, and we found ourselves on hard sidewalks, which we avoided by treading on the new grass. This river town, known as the Thread City for its spool manufacturing, is still evidenced by giant spool sculptures on the main bridge. In the past, French Canadians formed a large percentage of the town's populace, but unfortunately I heard no other languages that day. In the center of town, we foolishly searched for a place to sit down and to eat lunch. Unfortunately, it was Sunday afternoon and nothing was open. So we had already walked several hundred yards past the only open place in town, a Connecticut's own worldwide franchise, Subway. So we flipped a coin and Ryan lost, and he had to abandon his pack and tramp back to Subway to get our lunch. While waiting for my friend to return with the sandwiches, I sprawled in the concrete shade of the building. I'm like sitting there on the concrete sidewalk, like, People passing in cars stared at me with curiosity, and one woman asked, "Are you all right?" I didn't write this in here, but somebody offered me a ride, and somebody else offered me money. I was like, oh, I've become a hobo now. And then when he returned, we ate our cold and damp sandwiches on a park bench by some other homeless men. All this had wasted at least a precious hour more than we planned. It was now 2 p.m., and we still had 14 miles to go, though at the time I believed it was only 10. We had actually run out of water, and I had to buy outrageously expensive bottles from the nearby movie theater, filling 4 32-ounce bottles a bit more than halfway. That frugality turned out to be another horrible mistake. On the greenway just north of Willimantic, a small boy in a wheelchair met us and asked, "Where are you going?" "Up that way, to a campground." I wearily waved toward the north. "You'll get tired," the little boy exclaimed. "We're already tired," Ryan laughed. "You could die," the morbid kid insisted. We laughed and continued, but he was probably right. In fact, as the sun blasted down on us with mid-afternoon fury, we began to believe it. The rail trail had been paved within the environs of town, but we carefully walked on the gravel edge instead. I had not appreciated the huge difference in that before. Zoned by the heat, we passed through a warehouse and strip mall district, past piles of tires and logs, and across Route 6 into the woods again. While Ryan answered the call of nature, I waited on the raised crossway. 2 bicyclists rattled by on the gravel, the last people to appear for 12 miles. The sun went behind the trees, and we set a decent pace for a while, pounding along in silence. We stopped every mile or so for a snack or sip of sweet water, but distance was impossible to judge in the long straightaways and gentle curves of the railroad. Rain sprinkled from the gray sky, cooling us somewhat. Stone walls flanked us now, paralleling the endless causeway, but we couldn't enjoy them. There was only one thought now, to finish. If we kept going on this path, I'm going to skip that part. Yes. So when we at last crossed a road with a visible sign, Brook Street, I stared at the map, calculating how far we had to go. Lying to Ryan and myself, I said, "Almost there." As we ate nuts and jerky, the skies opened, and we hurriedly put on rain gear. Ryan sat in a blue poncho heap on a log by the road, and I desperately attempted to figure out a shorter distance, rain dripping on the maps. The next section sported a sign warning off travelers. I still don't know what that was all about, but we disregarded it, plugging along on hollow legs. Despite my hopeful lies, things began to go bad at this point. My legs were numb and empty, and Ryan winced with every step. Near Pine Acres Lake, the trail widened, but the rain increased. At last, a barrier appeared on the top of a rare hill. We leaned against it and ate our last snack, with nearly the last swallow of water. The last bit was consumed a half-mile up, the gorgeous 11th section road, which on any other days would have excited our minds and hearts, but we had no minds left. We'd become machines with one purpose. Now we'd run out of water and our mouths began to dessicate. "Mine tastes like salt," Ryan moaned. I've been in an actual desert with little water, but this was horribly different somehow, probably because it was raining and I'm like this, trying to get the water. We passed a few streams, but weren't sure if they were safe. I had iodine tablets, but that would take time we didn't feel we had. Perhaps we already weren't thinking clearly, or we might have stopped. We had already taken many breaks, and our legs were on autopilot, churning us slowly over hillocks and through heavy brush. "Never again," Ryan snarled at me. Reaching the road at last, I made another error, taking us left down the long forested hill to Route 198, but I had turned too soon. We reached the bottom by the Natchog River, not at the campground, but at a couple miles south. At last I screamed in utter exhaustion and frustration, something that made the irritable Ryan feel better, but not for long. On Route 198, the rain really began to come down, sounding like waterfalls on our already soaked heads. I tried to drink some, but my tongue was swollen and unresponsive. I began to hallucinate. I'm not exaggerating, that's the only time in my life I've hallucinated from lack of water and food. "There's the sign," I exclaimed with glee. It was a pair of mailboxes. At 25 miles, the large Byron campground sign actually wavered into sight. We turned down the hill on a rocky dirt path, splashing through muddy rills. Inside, the office building looked like a cross between a cafeteria and a hunting lodge. Not as nice as this room here today. But to us, it was a haven of pure good. A group of children stared at us like we were freaks, which, in a sense, we were. "Is there any water?" I asked a man who seemed to be in charge. "Sure, you can have water and coffee over there," the man at the table, who turned out to be the owner, pointed. Though we specifically asked for nothing else, our very beings must have cried for assistance. The group who had gotten takeout Mexican food gave us an extra dinner and a huge plate of chips. I heard one whispering that they had passed us on the road. Perhaps they felt guilty, or perhaps they were simply helping the needy. We sucked down everything. I bought lemonade, then drank 3 coffees and 2 waters, taking everything the campers had to spare. A man in Katabasis no longer feels special or privileged, and we certainly did not, having become little more than helpless beggars. We slowly set up the tent, dried off as much as possible, and unpacked sleeping bags. The kind owners let us leave our packs in the corner of the lodge to dry. Finally, we stumbled into the tent and crawled into our bags. As soon as it got warm, Ryan gleefully murmured, "I'd do that again." I had never seen anyone get high off food before, just from eating the food. He was totally high. "Are you crazy? I'm never doing that again." But I knew what he meant. This had been the most difficult day either of us has been through, but already the horror and humiliation had been transformed into past experience. We had survived, been taken to our lowest point, shown our utter limits. Our hearts were sobered and intensified by our descent. Being humbled once in a while is a healthy thing. So, that was the worst day I've ever had in Connecticut. I can't drink coffee at night. I drink 3 coffees and I went right to sleep. That's insane. It was a horrible day. The next day wasn't much better. So, do you think I hated Connecticut after that? Right? Did I hate Connecticut? No, of course not, right? I loved it all the more. It was an adventure, right? That made me thirsty just listening, just reading about being thirsty. Okay. So, I think that something that we need to take into account when we're talking about the land trust or blue trails or the greenways is that spirit of adventure. I think that that's one way to bring young people into the equation more, which is something I know we have problems with down in Hamden. I'm sure you have the same problems with that. So I'm going to give you guys some suggestions, and I hope we can talk about it a little bit. This is Simsbury. Who's seen this map before? Nobody. Oh, no, a couple, you've seen part of this map. Nobody's ever made this map before. This has a greenway on it, it has the blue trail, and it has some or most of your land trust trails. I just heard there's a new one. Where's the new one? The one that connects the Metacoma and the greenway? Where's that? So I can add it to it. It might be later. Anyone know? Amy, where did you go? Where is it? Is it over here somewhere? Okay. A little further. Okay. Okay. So that's a great start. One of the things that you need to turn things into an adventure. I take my nephews and nieces out on the trails in Connecticut, and we have little day trips, and that's exciting for them. But one of the things that I think makes an adventure is having an overnight trip, whether that's going to a campground or camping, or whether it's just going from bed and breakfast to bed and breakfast, which is something my wife and I have done in Connecticut, both hiking and biking in Connecticut. And I think that's something that could help our state, of course, one of the advantages of Connecticut being small, there aren't many of them, but one of the advantages is all our trails are close together in a way that they are not anywhere else in America. These trails in New England, and Connecticut in particular, are so close together, it's like the trails almost in Europe. Has anyone been hiking in Europe, where you go from like bed and breakfast to bed and breakfast? Someone's waving your hand in the back there. Hello. Yeah, in Europe, of course, they have trail systems that network everything. You can hike everywhere. You can hike from village to village. You get these big, I think they're called the Land Trust trails, but it's the National Trust. And you can literally map your own trails from town to town. We almost have that here in Connecticut in a way that, of course, could bring in European tourists if we wanted to, because they love that stuff. That's the way they hike. You see European tourists on the Appalachian Trail and places like that, I've seen, but you go to Europe and they're hiking everywhere, and they're not camping, they're used to staying in bed and breakfasts, inns, hotels, okay? You have several of those in Simsbury here. The little black marks are hotels and bed and breakfasts. Of course, there's one in Avon, which I forgot to mark. There's one up in Granby. We stayed in those on our bike trip across the state. There's one out there, I'm not sure, is that still there? It shows up on the maps. I don't know. Anyway, of course, once you get up to Barkhamsted, then you have camping up there as well. I put in a little, you might see my little dotted blue line up there. Has anyone, I shouldn't say this because it's probably illegal, but hiked, McLean Game Refuge connects to the interstate forest. Has anyone gone on the logging trails there, you know? Oh yeah. So they connect, right? So, sort of. You're not supposed to go. But you should be able to, because then you can connect the McLean Game Refuge to the Tunxus Trail. Then all of a sudden you really have something. And once we start doing that, when I hiked across Connecticut, you might have, I hiked on roads on part of it because you couldn't hike on trails. I had to, I'd go on the roads for 2 miles. I'd go on the roads, that's fine as long as there's sidewalks or there's a nice berm. What do you call it? Berm here? Yeah, okay. The side of the road. I became a real connoisseur of the sides of the roads. There was this one section, I think it was out in Woodstock. It was so nice and sandy and beautiful, and I was like, And I realized I'd become a connoisseur of the sides of the roads, that was a sort of dark moment, actually. It's like that. But really, with things like the Greenway, with like our New England Scenic Trail, the Metacomet, and all these other long trails we have in Connecticut, we have the opportunity to put things together in a way that they can in Europe. And of course, this is a good idea for tourism. But I think it's also really good for the people who live in that place. If you can go on an adventure in your hometown like that, I think that's just wonderful. My wife and I live on a blue trail. A blue trail goes through our backyard. And so literally we can walk on the blue trail, connect with the Greenway, walk into New Haven, and stay overnight, and come back. And we've done that. And we've biked in there, that's a lot easier. I can walk from my door over on the other blue trail down through West Rock State Park and go take the feeder trail, and I'm over in Westville. I can stay in a hotel there, and I can hike back the next night. So that kind of adventure is great, of course, for kids, but I think for adults too. And I think that really, it's something that we can do that I could not do where I grew up in Pennsylvania. There's trails over there. They're all miles and miles apart. You can't connect all this stuff. So I was looking at the map of your guys' trails here, and I'm excited that you guys have connected these two already, so that solves one problem. Although you can kind of do it down here in Avon. But look at what you got here. You got like a circle almost in Simsbury, right? You almost got it. You just got this little section here. Okay, this is all connected. It's just this one section there. And I'm not sure how good that road is. Is that a good walking road? I don't know. Maybe? Oh, that's, shoot. There's 44, so that's, you would know better than me. What's the name?
Old Farms?
Maybe. Yeah, it's gotta be, because it comes past your, it's that Old Farms, yeah. Is that a good road? Can you walk on that? No?
Well, I can take it by.
Yeah. So I mean, I had a lot of experiences with trucks, you know, right by my face. That's no fun. So, what you need to do, I think, is come up with a way you don't have to have a circle. A loop is neat. But come up with a way to have adventures and create day trips, of course, but use the Greenway, use the Blue Trails. I think we need, I was just talking with Bill Hosley, who some of you might know, runs the Creating a Sense of Place for Connecticut. And he and I were talking about how fragmented the historical things in Connecticut are. We've got 12 major history organizations, and then we've got 150 historical societies, and nobody talks to each other. Okay, it's all fragmented. If Connecticut Humanities runs something, my historical society doesn't get that information, okay, and disseminate it to its members, and it certainly doesn't work the other way. I think that hampers our natural, our trails and our other natural places just as much. We've got this wonderful state park system here. We've got the Greenway. We've got the Blue Trails, which is sort of with the state park system. But then we also have over 100 land trusts. Sometimes it's not even a land trust, sometimes it's a town. The town of Woodbridge, which is right next to where I live in Hamden, has exactly what you have, almost a complete loop of the town, just on their town trails, which I'm not sure if it's a land trust or just the town. Almost a whole loop with like about a mile and a half gap where you'd have to walk on the roads. There are sidewalks on most of those roads though. There is no map of that loop. I had to put it together with a dozen maps that they had. They're all their own websites. And I'm like, oh my God, you can hike around the town of Woodbridge. How cool would that be to have that idea in your head that your whole town is connected in this way, right? I think that it makes people think differently about nature and about conserving land and making trails, right? And I think that might be something that we could do in the future that will, of course, help our tourism, help bring people, but also make people care about Connecticut, about Simsbury in your case, more. And I think that kind of thinking is long overdue. When I look at the old maps in my historical research, I look at old maps all the time, and I see this network of old Native American trails and these turnpikes and things that connected everything, and I just start crying because I'm like, look how, I mean, the only way we can get from place to place is by car. And of course I love doing that, but I also love walking. And I think or biking, or any of these things, we can connect all this together. I think connection is almost always a good thing. That's what my whole book is about. So, thank you, and I'll start taking questions. Yes?
How about the concept of a vacation rental by owner?
Oh yeah. That's a way to do it
The
now.
land trust could publish a little book.
I know people who rent their homes out under DRO. What if we wanted to welcome hikers into our own homes? And those who are up for it could be on the list or have a little booklet that the land trust could publish.
Awesome idea. They do it in Europe. We have a very prickly sense of privacy. I think I would be a little weirded out by that. I mean, but I could do it. Hikers go past my house all the time. I have an extra room. I could let them camp in my backyard if I wanted, I guess.
There's a website for that, Warm Shower.
That's right, yeah.
Warm Shower.
Warm shower. Yeah, yeah, there's ways of doing this now. There's apps, and so this is something we might want to think about. Because you need to make connections not just with the trails, but private businesses, with bed and breakfasts, hotels, and people who are willing to do that sort of thing. Yeah. Other questions? Yes.
What if anything you do to protect yourself against Lyme?
Insect repellent, yeah. I'm surprised that, I've never gotten Lyme disease. I had a tick on my leg a couple times, and I always felt it and got it off, but I've been lucky with that, I think. I know a lot of people have Lyme, but they just have Lyme and they just keep doing it. I don't know. I wish, well, I don't wish I had Lyme, but I wish I could help you with a question about that. But I wear long pants. I never hike in shorts. Yes.
Unfortunately, on CNN and on the news networks, I rode my bike cross country when I was 20. Tell us your favorite story where somebody took you in for the evening. Because I know that happened to you, probably. Funny, the best memory of meeting somebody on the trip.
Oh man. I mean, there's so many, that's trail magic is what they call it, right? I mean, when you do long distance hiking, I mean, I've never gone across country, that's crazy. I mean, I was in England hiking, and my friend and I got to a bed and breakfast, what was supposed to be our bed and breakfast, and it was shuttered up. And we're like, it was closed, and we're like, what are we supposed to do? We're in this tiny village, like this tiny, the size of this room, there's a house. And so we're standing there, and some nice old lady comes out, and she's like, what's going on, loves? And so we told her, and she's like, oh, I've got a room. And we stayed over, and she gave us breakfast the next day, and she drove us down to the tavern to get our dinner that night. People can be nice. I mean, it was a wonderful moment. Trail magic. Things just happened to work out. Good question. I never got that question before.
The point of my asking or saying that is 98% of the people in this country are wonderful people.
That's right. And they will help you.
CNNs and then talk about that.
Yeah. You always get to hear about the bad stories.
There's more trail magic out there.
That's great. I agree.
Go on the trail.
I had so many, when I hiked the first time across Connecticut, I was by myself, and so many people were so nice. They gave me food. The next day on that hike that I was describing to you, we stopped in another campground to see if there was food that we could get in water. And the store was closed. Nice family was there. They gave us hot dogs. They gave us like 8 oranges that we had. We hadn't had fruit in a couple days. We're like, oh my God. So we had enough food for the rest of our hike then, just from this nice family. And I wrote down their name, and it got wet, and I have never been able to thank them. Except unless they've read the book, because they're in the book. The first names are in the book. Then they're like, hey, that was us. Any other questions? Well, I'll be happy to sign books if anybody's interested in any of my books tonight. Otherwise, thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you all. Really appreciate all
Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.